All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour and we have quite a few folks on the line, so we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Megan Ketchel, and I am the project manager for the Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center, or DETAC. This is the Beyond Limits Personal Journeys Towards Employment Success RISE e-learning community that is facilitated by the Washington Initiative for Supported Employment, or WISE. Today we have session 5, which is finding the place where you contribute, developing the path to self-employment. And we're really excited to welcome Steve Menard and his mom to today's session. So from there, I will turn it over to David from the WISE team. And David, you can take it away.
Thanks, Megan. Welcome everyone to our 5th session of this. I can't believe it's been already. Can't believe we've already been here doing this for 5 months. So, so today got Steve and his mother, Judy, and we're really excited to hear about his story. Move the slides, so like Megan said, I'm David Marahash, and I work for WISE here in Washington State, and I'm a technical assistant and training manager. And so today, sorry, I just lost the Zoom. There you go. Today we'll be hearing about from Steve and Steve's mom, and we'll about his art and the work that he does with that. And what we would like you to do as a part of the learning group, we would like you to listen and kind of reflect on the role of expectation in Steve's story, and really listen and reflect on Steve's story and how they learned from times when things didn't go well, and but how they were able to turn that into success. So kind of think about that as you hear Steve and Judy tell their story. So without further ado, let's so there's Steve, and let's go ahead and get started. Steve, actually, let's start with this. Hey, Steve. Steve loves jokes. Steve, do you want to tell us a joke?
Hey, Steve, let me take this for a minute and you tell us a joke. Tell us a joke.
So Steve's nonverbal and communicates with this communication device. Oh, would you tell us a joke? He was beginning to give you the Lord's Prayer, which is one of his go-to things.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Owls go.
Owls go who?
Yes, they do.
Good job, Steve. There you go.
So Judy, do you want to tell us a little bit of Steve's early life?
Sure. Steve, we knew there were some different things going on with Steve from when he was born. He was delayed on most of his milestones, and we thought at one point maybe he was hearing impaired because of his lack of response to things, but that wasn't the case. And so we kind of moved on through the system until he got to almost 3. And at which point we went back to his pediatrician and said, you know, things are still not seeming up to speed. He's missing milestones. He's that there was no speech, obviously, at that point still. And so they started us down the road of different diagnostics, and we went to see eventually a neurologist who said that they didn't call it autism at that point, they called it PDD, and asked if I knew what that was. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much a euphemism for autism. And so we went away and did some research and tried to figure out what to do, and ended up back with a different neurologist who gave us some pretty gloomy news. The person said, basically, Steve is not going to be able to designate or tell people apart, so he'll never know you from anybody else, and some other pretty gloomy forecasts for Steve's future. And we decided that we just weren't willing to accept that. Hold on a second. Safe hands, please, Steve. Thank you. That we weren't willing to accept that. So we kept on down the road of starting with birth to 3 programs and early preschool and speech therapy and occupational therapy. And he made some limited progress. And then when he was about 6, he got his first communication device after working with PECs very successfully for a while. And so he uses that communication device to express things that he's really interested in communicating to us. So once we took him roller skating, which he hated, and so he pulled up his device and asked for shoes. That was pretty great communication. And he uses it to ask for food, definitely, but also things like a break, or if he wants to go home, or various things that he's looking to get. So it's a super powerful communication tool for him. And so we continued to work with behavioral support. We did a lot of behavioral work, but the classic behavioral work, ABA, where you go and do a lot of repetitive tasks, didn't work well for Steve. I don't think he understood why he was back in his room doing all these repetitive tasks while the other kids were playing. And so we switched to functional things. We switched to put your shoes on, buckle your seatbelt, empty the dishwasher, tasks that made sense to Steve. And Steve, you thrived at those things. So from there, he started in the school district with in an ILC, integrated learning community, and he was in quite a few different schools trying to find the right placement. We had some struggles at school, and so he ended up with a one-on-one and then moving to a new placement. But he just kept plugging along and making more progress, and we kept plugging along trying to find ways to help Steve enjoy life and maximize his potential. He's done some special needs sports where he was with a group of other people that played soccer and baseball and basketball. And he played that for several years until they moved inside to accommodate the wheelchairs. And that created such a noisy environment for Steve. It was overstimulating, and we moved on to other things. He did some swimming programs in Special Olympics, and he enjoyed that. Unfortunately, they didn't have a category for splashing, which is Steve's major success in the pool. And so he wasn't competing in the events, but he enjoyed going to the pool and swimming with his peers. He's active in his community. He's active at his church, where he it's his responsibility to light the candles up front before the church service starts. So he carries his taper up, and then we help him light it up front, and he lights the candles. And we're just finding ways that Steve can participate at his level in his community, and he's been very successful at it. So we do a lot of camping. He loves these ivy leaves that he picks on his walks. And in our house, he's got 2 sisters, one older, one younger, his dad and I, and then a slew of pets. So we've always got dogs and cats, and Steve enjoys them. Excuse me a minute. Thank you, Steve. Steve enjoys interacting with, especially the dogs. Have you noticed that he likes hair too? So that's an ongoing struggle, is to make sure Steve's hands stay to himself.
Yeah. When you first heard about his diagnosis, what did you think when you started thinking about his future, when you've heard that diagnosis? What did you think Steve would be doing?
So when we first heard the diagnosis, it was somewhat of a relief, because now at that point we knew what it was that we were dealing with, and it was sort of, okay, let's go. And we weren't quite ready to think far out in his future, because at that point we had no idea what the next 5 years would look like. And so we would make 5-year and 10-year plans to try to set some goals and see what he could do. We were pretty sure he wouldn't be living independently. We weren't sure if he'd be able to work, although we really wanted him to. And we knew that it was going to be our job. And one of his sisters also expressed this very early on, that she wanted to be part of the team that was helping him maximize his potential. We knew we just wanted his quality of life to be good, so that he was happy and knew that he was loved. And from there, we knew when it came to be time, we could tackle things like what he would do for a job and what his life would look like.
I know when my sister was born, I have a sister with Down syndrome, and I know what my mom, my mom was struggling, like, oh, where's my daughter going to be when she grows up? And one thing that really helped her was the doctor said, well, my mom was kind of thinking like, well, she's going to be living with us forever. And but one of the things that helped her was that the doctor said, like, she might not want to live with you forever.
Oh,
And that
interesting.
she had, she's going to have her own thoughts on her own decisions that she wants to do. And definitely when you're looking in the future, like having those thoughts, like, oh, and dreaming of a job, it's like, that's really helpful for everyone. That's that there is high expectations for your son or daughter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In Steve's case, since he is nonverbal and his communication is limited to things that are right in front of him,
Mhm.
it's difficult to ask questions like, would you like to work inside or would you like to work outside? Or and so we find ourselves watching him in different situations and seeing what gives him joy and seeing where he's successful, and then trying to create experiences from that. One thing that works well with Steve is that we're able to ask him questions and give him choices. So I'm not going to actually give him a choice right now, but we might say, Steve, do you want ice cream or do you want Brussels sprouts? And then he can select the choice that he wants.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a right hand day. He's only going to pick what's on your right hand. So we'll ask the question in a different order to see if it changes. Sometimes, especially with one of his sisters, it's a big game. So he'll choose the Brussels sprouts just so that he can see her react and say, oh, Brussels sprouts. But in general, that's a helpful way. But again, it's choices of things that are very present. You want to take a walk or play a game. So figuring out what it is that is best for Steve and what it is that Steve wants in his choices across the board, job placement, future, that's really tough to do.
Yeah.
But again, that's the highest goal, is to make sure that he's part of that whole decision-making process, even without a verbal voice to make his choices.
Definitely. Can you start talking about school from going to school into transition?
So because Steve's sensory needs, especially when he was younger, totally drove his program, school was very challenging for him. So there were things that disturbed him, like noises or bright lights. And then there were things that he craved, like deep pressure or crunchy foods. And because it was tough to get a read on Steve, it was tough for the staff at school to figure these out, despite conferences and things. And so because Steve's sensory needs weren't being met, there were some behavioral challenges that arose. And they were reluctant to provide him with a one-on-one because they figured, or what they told us was that if you have a one-on-one, you might get too dependent on that one-on-one and you wouldn't be able to generalize your skills. And so we kind of limped along with that approach for some time until we had a situation in 7th grade where he was working with a new teacher in 7th grade, and he, as you've seen, he likes to have his hands in hair, and we think that's a sensory thing partly, but partly when you pull somebody's hair, you get a great big reaction often, especially with a new person getting their hair pulled. And I think he liked that reaction. And so things at school continued to escalate until his behavior was pretty out of control. He would leave the classroom, but they were afraid of him, so nobody would go out to bring him back in. And that's not safe for Steve to be out wandering the halls or even to the streets by himself. So we pulled him out of school, and we worked at home to try to figure out what to do. And the school solution was just to send a tutor, well, once or twice a week, but we felt strongly the school had helped create this problem. They needed to be part of the solution. So we wrote a letter and he went back to school in a new placement with a one-on-one, and things really turned the corner for him. So by the time he got to high school, he had that one-on-one level of support. He had teachers that had a different skill set that were able to work better with him. And things began to get better. So he made it through high school. He had places that when he was escalated, he could either be removed from the room or the other students would be removed from the room. So things were again safe. They could start working more on communication. And it was quite successful. So he moved from high school to the transition program. And at that transition program, his one-on-one was a fellow named Orion that he had known back when he was in a summer program, where Orion was one of the staff of the summer program. And so he and Orion had a great relationship, and they were able to take some trips into the community together. Steve worked at the food bank. Hold on a sec. Let me suggest that he switch to a different video. See if that's a little better. So he was able to go out in the community. He was doing some work at the food bank. He was great at sorting apples. So he could choose which apples were good and could go out to the clients, and which apples were bad and needed to go in the bad box. He was good at packing things up. Excuse me a minute. Steve, show me safe hands. Put this down and show me safe hands. Thank you. So, you know, things were going pretty good. So he was in transition for 3 years and was out more and more into the community. Some things were still a bit challenging, like if the class was taking the light rail down to Seattle Center for the day, that was a bit more than Steve was able to handle. So he would do an alternate trip instead, but really making a lot of progress. They were all super proud of his achievements, as were we. So then he started at the end of his transition program, he started looking at job placement, and we worked with the Department of Vocations. And the Department of Vocations was able to help us find, well, I'm not sure if they actually helped us find Enzo or if we found Enzo outside of them, but then they worked together with Enzo. And my husband worked for the fire department, and so we knew that Steve totally loved to shred. It hit a lot of sensory things for him. It had that nice rumbly sound. There was vibration involved. Putting paper in the shredder was a repetitive job, so he loved that. And he spent several years working as their shredder at the fire department. And it benefited the fire department too, because they had been paying a service to do their shredding. And so they could stop paying a service and pay Steve instead. Worked out really well. Orion, who was one of Steve's biggest fans and still is, Orion moved from the job he had supporting Steve at the school district to Enzo, and supported Steve at Enzo for a couple of years while Steve worked at the fire department. And again, that was a great coach for Steve. They really clicked and did well together. Do you want me to keep talking about his career, or?
Yeah, let's we can move to the next. Sorry, the computer went asleep a little bit.
Well, I'll just keep talking then.
Yeah.
So he kept working at the fire department. Of course, COVID struck, and we were super, super careful during COVID because we weren't sure what it would look like for Steve to get COVID with some of his health challenges, and the fact that being sick is another trigger for Steve's behavior. So we really, really wanted to stay away from COVID, and we hunkered down at home. And by this time, Orion had moved on to his other job, and Dora from Enzo was working with Steve. And Dora was another excellent placement for Steve. And so she worked over the phone with us. And when he was able to go back, then she worked with him at the fire department, and they continued Steve's shredding. He was working twice a week for 3 hours each time. And so that went really well for a couple more years. And then Dora moved on to some other responsibilities, and Steve was placed with a new job coach. And he hadn't worked with this new job coach very long. And one day, something happened, and none of us are exactly sure what it was that happened, because only Steve and the job coach were in the room. But there was a pretty aggressive hair pulling incident, and we've all spent a lot of time talking about what might have led up to this, and we're thinking that it's possible the job coach wasn't comprehending how aggressive those hair pulls could be, and so possibly wasn't as careful as she might have been to keep herself safe. But whatever it was that led up to it, it just turned out it wasn't a good fit, and this aggressiveness happened, and as a result, Steve lost his job with the fire department. And so he was home, not working for quite a while as a result of that. Which was pretty heartbreaking, because he'd been successful for so long, and he wasn't given the opportunity to go and learn from it and move on. But you got to deal with what you get. So Enzo contacted Wise, and Chuck came out and worked with Steve. And I think that the original goal was to have Chuck come out and assess Steve to see if Steve was safe to return to work. At the time, Steve and I were going to the church every weekend. We were folding the newsletter. Actually, Steve was folding the newsletter that was sent out to the people at church. So he'd fold the newsletter using a jig that we developed for him. And then he would put the newsletter in the envelope and seal the envelope and pile them up so they could go out in the mail. So there's a lot of steps there, and Steve was extremely successful. In fact, he's still doing it, and he enjoys it tremendously. So he's doing that. But while Chuck was observing that, we got to talking about how much Steve likes creating art. Steve, he loves to paint. He's got a couple of looms that he loves to weave on. He's quite skilled with a dauber. He'll cover an entire page with the exact same color of dauber, and then we all use that for wrapping paper, so that he's got his own wrapping paper line going. And so we got to talking. Chuck suggested starting a business for Steve to sell his artwork. And that sounded like a great idea, but my concern was I didn't want Steve just at home working with a job coach and no social contact or integration into the community. So what we decided to do is we decided to not only start Steve a business, but we also started an organization at our church called Des Moines Open Door Arts. And Des Moines Open Door Arts is an art program, and we're intentionally including special needs adults in this art program. But because we feel we want to be as inclusive as possible, we've also kept it open to the community. And so once a week, we open up Open Door Arts, and we have adults with special needs. We have elderly people. We have a small homeschool family that comes. So we've got this wide range of ages, wide range of abilities, and we all gather in this room and create art together. And so Lindsay, who you'll be meeting soon, comes as Steve's job coach, and she works with Steve on his art there in a very busy environment with a lot of other people that Steve says hello to and shares supplies with and creates art with. And it's a delightful afternoon of art. And the way we've made it work is that we're pretty much operating just on donations from people in the community when they go through their craft cupboards or whatever other space they're cleaning out. They donate yarn and buttons and paint and various things, and then we come along and we use those things to make art projects. So or we're kind of running on a shoestring, using the generous space the church has given us, creating this super inclusive, super welcoming environment, and then adults with special needs try to provide an opportunity that we couldn't find in the community before we started this. So
I think we have videos that we can show of Steve doing some of this work. I was going to ask, you checked, did Lindsay log in?
Yeah, hi, I'm
Lindsay?
here.
Oh, there you are. I see.
Hi.
Lindsay, do you want to talk about working with Steve a little
Open Door Arts.
at Open Door Arts?
Sure. So I've actually known Steve for many, many years. So moving into the job coaching part was pretty natural transition since I'm familiar with Steve's strengths and some of the challenges that come along with working with Steve. So we make a pretty good team, I'd like to think. And yeah, Steve just loves creating art, and it's really easy to get him motivated, and he makes really neat things that have very high quality and value. And he enjoys weaving at home, but now we're going to have some looms at Open Door Art, so that's great. And you know, I would say really just the biggest challenge is just the consecutive amount of time that Steve selects to work for. So that's just that's our big thing that we focus on, is just keeping him motivated to stretch out those work periods. Yeah, but he loves it, and I really feel like that's where he shines, and you get to really see Steve's personality and his strengths through his art.
Should we show some of the videos?
That'd be great.
We have 3 videos. I can get it to, there we go.
And David, I don't think we're hearing the audio for the video right now. I don't know if,
Try that again.
okay.
So while he's spooling that up, what you saw there is the arts and crafts room. And in the background, there's a bulletin board, and that has some of the artwork that the artists have made. And as they pan around the room, while you're watching the video, you'll see various other artists, and maybe get a sense of the diversity in the room and the projects that they're working on.
This works.
David, still no audio for us. I don't know if you have to share and unmute your other Zoom line, or how that, maybe mute the studio but unmute your, I'm not sure.
It's working out.
Go ahead and hit play and then unmute Live Studio for a second.
I'll reshare it.
Yeah, that didn't work. There you go. It was almost there. Sounds good now.
You want to be left alone? I've already checked out the You wanna be left alone?
Oh, knock knock joke.
Here comes a knock knock joke.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Owls go.
Owls go.
Owls go who?
Yes, they do.
Good one, Steve. Well, so the way this started was, we were looking for employment opportunities for Steve. And Chuck had come to, are you okay to talk about Chuck? Okay, good, because we wanted to talk about your job, and we wanted to talk about your painting, and we wanted to talk about your weaving. Are you okay with that? So, finding a job for Steve is challenging, and finding a job coach for Steve is challenging. And so we were looking at ways we could get Steve back working in an environment that supported him a little bit better. And we've shown Chuck some of Steve's art, his painting and his weaving and his other projects. And Chuck suggested starting a business. Hey, Steve. Crisscross But our concern about starting a business for Steve was that Steve would be just painting by himself at home. We wanted something more social for him. So we came up with the idea of starting a makerspace where people could come and work on crafts, and we could tailor it for people with special needs, but be super inclusive and invite whoever walked in the door, so that we had a really wide range of ages and skills and abilities. And so that was the idea behind what we're doing here.
Wow, okay. How many years have you done this?
Oh, just 2 months.
2
We
months?
just started, yeah.
Do you like it, Steve? Do you like it?
Hey, Steve. Steve, do you like painting? Do you like painting? Yeah? Do you like coming here on Wednesdays?
So it's only open on Wednesdays?
We're just Wednesday afternoons right now. And so we thought if it took off, we might try and do 2 days a week. But for now, we're just starting with Wednesdays. So, and then he does parts at home too. So at home he has 2 and he just finished painting 5 big, brightly colored pictures. That 3 of them are up in his room at home, and then 2 we're gonna put on his page, his website, so that he can sell them.
Okay. So I'm from Chicago, and I like to help people out. So what's his website so people can visit?
So his website, his business name is Painting Outside the Lines. So his website is just paintingoutsidethelines.org.
Okay.
And there's a little bit about Steve's story, and it shows some of the art that he's made, and a lot of his art will cut into pieces and turn into cards. So
I gotta say, I love painting outside the line.
So this is Steve weaving on his little loom at home. It's a very sensory activity for him. And he makes scarves and table runners. And you can see that the high five is a big important part of it.
Nice job.
I'm gonna move in a little bit here so you can see a little bit better what he's doing.
Well done.
He's good at problem solving when that loose end gets stuck on things. Although it's a little frustrating.
Good job.
Very well done. So when Chuck comes back, we'll put him to work making lunch next time he's here.
So, Chuck, this is gonna be for my dog. You know, I got actually 2 chihuahuas that can fight for this, you know.
Oh, I've got a chihuahua.
Oh, yes. Show Tracy. Tracy.
How big is your chihuahua?
Pretty big.
Over 10 pounds.
I like to wear my hat as a bracelet.
Mine's
Well, actually, they're my mom's chihuahuas, but I call it mine.
Do you want to try it on?
They,
Oh,
let's see,
that's
this one, right?
lovely.
Is this a bracelet?
Yes, but look, it's a bracelet on this side.
Very nice.
Stunning.
I like the bracelet that you have on.
That's really
That is really pretty. I love those. So you know, Steve and Nicole went to school together, right? Or they know each other
They
from?
know each other.
Oh,
Sports.
from sports. Okay.
Yeah, they used to play on the same sports team through the line. And Nicole, you play soccer? And you play baseball? And you play, what else? Basketball?
I think I screwed up. But oh well.
Do you like bowling still?
Hey Nicole, can I see your bracelet? Yeah.
Nicole, should we show them your bracelet? Oh, that's stunning, Nicole. You want to show them the heart that you made? It's really turning out pretty. You want to show them your heart? Can I show them?
There's my chihuahua.
Here's Nicole's heart.
Right now, we got my phone.
Wow.
Isn't that pretty?
Judy, those rhinestone stickers are winners. Those are a lot of fun.
Oh, are those
Wow.
cute?
Yeah.
And there's Marley with her chihuahua.
That's brilliant.
That's great. Muting myself. Okay. So so how did that all get started? Getting into those, his own business, getting into working with others in this.
Well, so like I mentioned, it was a conversation with Chuck early on where we were sitting around the table, helping Steve with his folding and envelope stuffing and, you know, really thinking, where are Steve's strengths? And what are things that Steve gets, the activities that Steve finds rewarding and valuable? And we kept circling back to the art. And I brought some of the art and showed Chuck what Steve's doing. We've taken that painting that Steve's done, the abstract painting, and he's painted onto canvas bags. He's painted onto coasters, paper that we cut and made cards. And actually what happens is we've got so much of the stuff that Steve's made and he gives it away. He's given it away to teachers and various places. And Chuck said, well, have you ever thought of starting a business? And it seemed out of reach to me when we first talked about it, because you know, the idea of starting a business for one person with the art that Steve makes seemed a little bit overwhelming. But as we got to talking about it and got to talking about how can we create an environment that Steve could do this art socially, you know, we sort of got to a why not? Why not try this? And so I applied for a business license, and one of our daughters helped get the website going. And we talked to the church and asked permission to use some space at the church and began reaching out to the community for art supplies. And it sort of just took a life of its own. There is a need in the Des Moines area. We live in Des Moines. There is a need in the Des Moines area for programs for adults with special needs, just to have a safe space to go and be accepted and welcomed. And the community of Des Moines has jumped on board. The looms that that Lindsay mentioned, we're going to add to our art room. The Des Moines Legacy Foundation gave us a grant to pay for those, and we've received some cash donations. The Eagles gave us some money. And like I said, the community's been giving us a ton of supplies. So every week I go a little bit early and I lay out whatever the next project's going to be. And we just jump in and do things. And we've had members of the community come that it's interesting to see what their niche is. There's a young man that came in that just likes to paint black. So he painted paper black and he was happy as could be. You saw Nicole making some bracelets out of the remains after we punched out the part that you were supposed to be making Valentine's decorations out, and that became her bracelet. And so the fun thing about it is just these people come in and they tell us what their skills are, and we're able to just say, okay, let's do that. You know, or yes, make bracelets out of plastic waste from other projects or whatever. And so it's just a joyful place. And you know, it took some time and it took some thought, but the community is so on board and the church is so on board giving us this space. And Steve enjoys going there. He works well with Lindsay there. That it just sort of took on a life of its own. But it was one of those things where there was a pivotal moment when Chuck was first suggesting this, and I'm like, oh man, you know, that just seems like so much. And to switch to, why not? You know, why not give this a try? It's working well for Steve. So it's fun to have found a place. It's more than fun. It's rewarding to have found a skill that Steve already has that we can maximize. And you're really good at that art, Steve. It's fun having you use that skill that you have to create things. It's fun seeing him build relationships and for us to build relationships with people in the community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Lindsay, do you have other things you wanted to share?
Well, not necessarily, but I just off of what Judy was saying, it's really exciting, I think, for me to see that something was kind of created around Steve and now there's so many other people benefiting from it. So it just, I think it's a good example for things that other people could start in their own communities, or for the person that they care for or their child that may have a similar situation just that Steve has.
Great. And these are the websites to the one is for Steve's art, and one's for the art, was it art studio or
Yeah, we call it a maker space, but
Makerspace.
it's pretty much an art studio.
Mhm.
And even looking at what he's doing here, you know, he's painting this pumpkin. I have some college friends that come over every year, and we have this crazy pumpkin event with the girls and the friends. And we're like, how can we get Steve to be part of this? He doesn't like the feel of the guts inside the pumpkin, and he doesn't like maybe it's the odor or the feel of the freshly cut pumpkin. Well, let's just get the paints out. So now Steve participates in our annual event by painting pumpkins. So not sure that there'd be much of a market for those if we tried to put them on his website, but it's a fun activity that he enjoys.
So do you have anything, I guess, from going from, you know, growing up, not sure of what kind of job he would be doing, to having him lose a job, now having his own business, like, what would you say to other people that might be in similar situations, or is looking for work there?
So I think a lot of it's perseverance. When Steve, we were so excited for Steve to be working at the fire station where his dad worked, and to be doing something that had value for Steve and met so many sensory needs. And it was devastating when he lost that job. And then to hear that there weren't really any job coaches that could help Steve, and to hear that there weren't jobs available for Steve. It was it was troubling to think that we lived in a community that couldn't provide those opportunities for somebody. And so then turning and creating that opportunity for Steve and for others has been rewarding, but to be truthful, it's also extremely demanding, you know, to go out and learn what's involved in starting a business and to learn how to pay the taxes and how to come up with supplies for people. And so, you know, our answer won't be everybody's answer, but I think my message would be, don't give up. I mean, I think if you get in a situation where there isn't something that's available that meets the needs of your person, maybe creating the job and the makerspace isn't going to be everybody's solution, but there is a solution there. And it's just a matter of going out and finding what that solution is, or perhaps finding something outside the traditional job framework. You know, maybe there's a different activity that your person really likes to do, and then maximize the activity and see if you can somehow turn that into a job. And that also was how his shredding started. His dad worked for the fire department. We knew he loved to shred. His dad approached the fire department and said, "Hey, could Steve do this?" So again, that was a situation where there wasn't a job out there that worked for Steve. So it was creating an opportunity and creating the job. So I think that would be the perseverance and the creativity to find something that really meets the needs of your person.
Thank you. That's a great answer and a good way to end the conversation. But we do have the Q&A parts. If you're willing to answer some questions from our for the folks online.
Of course.
But we really thank you for joining us and sharing. Well, Steve, we enjoy hearing your story, and but we also appreciate you helping tell the story too. So,
and Lindsay too. Lindsay's a valuable
Lindsay,
part of our
thank
team.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us as well. So we have about like 10 minutes. If any folks have questions, or I also added some like discussions from what I talked about at the beginning, but if you have any just more broad stories or answers, you want to answer any of those questions that are on screen, then feel free to unmute and add stuff to the chat.
Hey, David, it's Chuck. While we're waiting for all these questions to roll in, good to see you, Lindsay. And to me, and I wanted to get both your inputs about this. I mean, it's real easy to look at the barriers and the things that are in the way, and you know, thinking outside the box and working with organizations and people. I think Steve makes it really clear what's going to work and what doesn't work. You just have to pay attention, and so it's real important to have people who understand him or have had experience, you know, working with people over a longer term. So talk about, you know, kind of thinking outside the box and creating supports that work for the person, if you would, either Lindsay or Judy.
You want to go ahead, Lindsay? Well, I'll tell you, one thing that comes to mind when Chuck asks the question is that when Steve and I started doing the volunteer work at church, one of his tasks was to take a piece of paper and fold it into thirds so that it would fit inside the window. But when you think about how many things you have to put together skill-wise to fold a piece of paper into thirds, that wasn't going to just happen. So Steve's dad and Chuck and I kind of collaborated and came up with this jig where Steve puts the piece of paper in it, and it's got a little frame, so the piece of paper is supported, and then we bring this flap down that covers this part, and he folds it over and folds it over and presses it so it's ready to go. So it's a piece of what had to happen to make this work was taking a look at what each skill was that Steve needed to have to be successful, and then breaking that into small tasks so that we could chain the new skill pieces together to a point that Steve could be successful. And originally, at that same job, Steve was, excuse you, at that same job, Steve was having trouble after he got the letter in the envelope. It was difficult for him to use the little sponge to wet the seal to fold it over. So the church administrator just went out and bought envelopes where you peel the strip and the glue is ready to go and fold it over. So in Steve's case, it's very fortunate for him that he's part of a community with Lindsay and the people that support him outside his family and his family and Chuck, where there's a lot of problem solving going on. So that's an example of one. Another thing that I thought of, Chuck, when you asked the question is challenging behavior is a real part of Steve's world, and working with people that can recognize the beginning of escalation and helping you to redirect your behavior into good choices before it escalates to a point where things aren't safe is a super important skill for whoever works with Steve to have as well. And so finding those people, you know, we had it with Orion, we had it with Dora. We didn't have it with the job coach where things got out of control at the fire station. We've got it with Lindsay. So it's finding people that are willing to watch for those cues, because they're if you know what you're watching for, that's pretty clear when the escalations are starting. And then being flexible enough to say, okay, what can we change in the environment to bring things back down where everybody's going to stay safe.
You know, it's funny, Judy, when you were talking about that, you know, the first part was I taught classes in systematic instruction and how to teach people skills. And what you're talking about is universal design. And that's not a relevant skill only for individuals who happen to be disabled. It's relevant for everybody. And figuring out better ways to train and teach people is part of the business community. And, you know, from my perspective, Steve's a great teacher in how to teach people how to really do precision training and come up with better ways of doing it. And then the other part is, you know, learning de-escalation and de-escalation skills for people. Once again, is a really, really important skill to have just in life in general. And I think, you know, finding people and being able to work with people to do that is really good.
Yeah, that all makes a ton of sense. That applies to Steve a lot. And in fact, if you feel like Steve's a good resource, Steve and I are happy to share our skills anytime we can help you out.
Well, we've talked about that in terms of teaching people, because we used to teach classes out here in Washington many years ago about teaching skills, and we bring in consultants, and Steve would be a great consultant in how to teach people how to really learn how to train efficiently, effectively, and successfully.
I have a question for Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, about your website. I don't know if you've already put that up, but could you put up your website again or share your website? And are we able to make purchases if we see something on the website that we like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually the biggest next challenge in Steve's program is that he's making these things, but we haven't figured out a way how to advertise the website well enough, because as I understand it, the goal in keeping a job coach is that Steve needs to be earning enough income from his business that it would pay the equivalent of whatever he'd be earning or more, the equivalent of whatever he'd be earning at a job. So you can, I think they'll put the website back up for you, but you can go there, you can purchase things. I think there's a link to the email if you have special requests you want to make or suggestions or ideas. So yeah, I'd love to have you take a look, and I'd love to get your feedback of what you think is cool and what maybe we could be doing better.
Okay.
So if they don't put it up, it's just paintingoutsidethelines.org.
Is it,
There
are
it
you
is.
saying just,
And
oh, there it is.
Judy,
Okay,
and I was
got
going to
it.
say too that I dropped those links in the chat as well. Both Painting Outside the Lines and the Des Moines Open Door Arts links are shared in the chat, and I can reshare them 1 second.
Okay.
Oh,
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
So we're thinking of where the future of Open Door Arts is, and we're looking at the possibility of making that a nonprofit so we can go out and apply for some grants. And our local city, the city of Des Moines, is also interested in collaborating with us and making us part of their Parks and Rec program so that we could work together to get better community awareness and bring in additional adults with challenges. And in fact, they've invited us to their Wednesday night concert in the park series, and they're talking about putting a tent up for us. And if we brought some supplies, we could have a place where we could not only be advertising ourselves, but we could have some adults come in and do art projects right there. So that would be super cool. Lindsay and I have been talking about that, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens once you get past the barriers and start looking at opportunities. You know, also talking about, I mean, there's all sorts of community art fairs and craft fairs and stuff like that, you know, which are also really good potential places to get out and meet people, but also, you know, share your skills and sell stuff.
Yeah, and take our community that comes to our makerspace, take them out of the room and out into the community. That would be super exciting. When we started, I had this idea that we'd be creating all this art at the Des Moines Open Door Arts. We'd be creating all this art that we could go and sell at these places. It turns out, I'm not sure all of our art is as interesting to the public as we might think it is. You know, Steve's daubering. I'm not sure somebody would look at a piece of paper that's daubered all the same color and say, oh yeah, I want to buy this for some reason at home. But that's, I think, our next step is to look at that marketing to become a little more self-sustainable, and but also marketing ourselves so that more people come and participate.
Anyone else have any questions? Megan, is there anything in the chat?
Nope, nothing else that I'm seeing in the chat, but if anyone does have any questions or comments to share, please feel free to come off mute or chat in. The links to the Painting Outside the Lines and the Des Moines Open Door Arts websites are both in the chat as well.
I also, David, I wanted to apologize for the camera work on those videos. That was, we didn't hire a very skilled cameraman, and it just cracks me up when I saw that. I've watched it a few times, and Chewy, if you guys have been a part of the series, Chewy was one of the other presenters, and him making the dog toy, it's like he basically pulled stuff out and put it back in. He was at the same place he started when he finished. So I think the dog toy will be done in about 37 or 40 years. So just wanted to add that.
Chuck, I believe that was my official interview for Enzo, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Showing Chewy how to make the dog toy.
Right. Once you had to go back in and do some intensive work.
They're a lot of fun to make, very relaxing once you get the hang of it. That's another item we are working on to have Steve learn to do.
Well, as we wind up, can we ask Steve to say see you later?
Yeah, we can do that.
Hey, Steve, we're almost done. Would you say see you later, please?
Here, I'll hold this while you say see you later.
See you later.
Thanks, Steve. Just so you know that our final session of the series will be on June 10th, same time. But thank you again to Steve and Judy for coming and presenting with us, and Lindsay for jumping in as well. So Megan, do you have anything to say before we?
That is about it. Thanks, David, Steve, Judy, Lindsay, Chuck, everyone for joining and contributing today. And thanks to all of our participants for joining. We hope this was helpful and a valuable experience. We hope to see you on our final sessions, like David said, on June 10th. So hope to see you there. At that point, we will also have a quick evaluation just to kind of share any key takeaways that you have from attending these sessions. So if you can think ahead of time about those, we'll send out that link on the 10th. But other than that, David, we are good to go.
Thank you, everybody.